Are you aging in place within a homeowners association? Do you pay monthly dues? Is there an annual meeting where you vote for the board of directors? Have you ever heard of the word assessment, CC&Rs, and bylaws? If any of these rings true for you, then today's show is especially relevant. Our guest on Let's Talk, Adrian Adams, is an expert attorney specializing in common interest developments ranging from resorts to retirement communities. Welcome, Adrian. Let's talk.
Rochelle, I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have to start with what exactly is a common interest development, what types are there, and where are seniors mostly residing?
Well, common interest developments are new to California, recent, at least in recent history. They started basically in the 1960s. They really took off and started as a form of development. And basically what it means is that an owner owns something such as airspace, and then owns something in common with the rest of the owners in the development. And there are really basically four kinds of common interest developments. The condominiums, which most people are familiar with. There are planned developments where it looks like a house on a lot, in fact it is, and then what they own in common might be something like the streets. And then there are co-ops, which are more common back east in New York, but we do have some here. And you see some of them in some of the 55 plus or retirement communities. And then community apartments. So those are the four basic kinds of common interest developments.
And so where are the seniors living? Are they living in all of them?
They're living in all of them.
Okay.
The seniors are in all of the types of developments, but you'll see them concentrated more into something that's a more recent development, and that is the 55 plus communities.
We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But I want to talk to you, as an attorney working with associations, I know that there's going to be a lot of legal and safety issues around aging in place. People are getting older, things are happening. What are some of the common things that you've encountered working with your clients around safety? And then, of course, you have to worry about liability. So just talk to us about some examples that are most common in the aging in place.
Okay. Well, let me explain for viewers what aging in place, what we're referring to when we talk about that. And that is, you've got people who have bought into a development. And they may have bought 30 years ago. And now they're getting to a point where they're approaching retirement age. And this aging in place is significant and becoming more significant all the time because there are approximately 75 million baby boomers, and they are retiring, hitting that retirement age, and they're doing it at the rate of about 10,000 per day. And so it's a real significant issue and becoming increasingly so in developments where you have these baby boomers who are aging in place, continuing to live in their units, and you have a number of kinds of issues that will come up as they get older, and most all of them are health-related issues. Whether their bones are getting a little more fragile, their balance is becoming an issue, and what happens is you see more trips and falls, and injuries that will result from the trips and falls. And other kinds of aging or health-related issues, for example, something like their hearing. Their hearing is starting to go, and so they're turning their TV up, and it's causing a problem with the surrounding units. And so for homeowner associations, where you have a board of directors that are overseeing the operations, overseeing the association, they get complaints. They have to investigate those complaints. They need to deal with those kinds of issues. And those are not big issues, the hearing issues, but then you start getting into memory loss issues. And this can become much more serious, and that's where we see more of the more serious problems. Something like they are cooking and they turn on their stove, and then they go into another room and forget that they put something onto the stove. And then you can have burned food setting off smoke alarms, or more seriously, you can have some fires occurring in the kitchen, or turning on the bath water and forgetting that it's on. And if it's in a high rise, it overflows, and it can hit 8 floors going all the way down the water, which we had in one of the associations. So those kinds of memory loss issues can lead to more safety, property damage, and life safety kinds of issues. Then if you progress even further into the memory loss area, into dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia, then you have more serious issues that occur with for example, things go into the unit but never come out. You have hoarding issues that start to develop. And in fact, one of my attorneys recently had to go into court on a hoarding issue to deal with, because it becomes a safety issue. Not only do you have odors coming out of the unit, it attracts insects and rodents. You have mold issues that start to develop in the unit. And because, especially in condominiums, they share walls, then it impacts all of the surrounding unit owners. And so that becomes the more serious kinds of issues that we deal with the aging in place population. But you can have something as simple as especially we see it when they're hitting their 80s. They realize that maybe time is growing short for them. And so when an association wants to spend money on maintenance issues or upgrading things or repainting the building, and they want to increase dues or a special assessment, you get a huge amount of resistance from those in that age group, because they're not going to benefit from that, and so they don't want to spend the money. And so that becomes then a battle between the younger population and the older population within the associations.
Well, that's got to be a big issue, because most of the seniors are on fixed incomes, so it's kind of, for them, let's say they need something done, but they're afraid to even say something because it may impact their monthly dues. They're on a fixed budget, so they're kind of in a bind. But the other thing is, what happens if somebody falls? I mean, that's a big issue. I'm sure you have to deal with that. Not only is it a safety issue for the older adult, but what are the liability issues for an association? They can't really pick the senior up. That's not their job. How do you deal with those kind of issues? Those are more hands-on.
Yes, and in fact, you pointed out something. It's kind of unique to a particular kind of the common interest developments, normally the high-rises, because they'll have an on-site staff. Right. And so you have this older, aging-in-place population. They're paying their dues, and they expect that the staff is there to meet their needs. And if you have somebody who falls out of bed or falls in their unit, they call downstairs, they want one of the maintenance guys to come up and assist them getting their husband back into bed or helping them into a chair. And because of the liability, if you assist them, then you may cause additional injuries, and then the association gets sued. And the associations are not set up as assisted living facilities, they're not set up as nursing homes, and so their roles are limited to maintaining the common areas and providing other kinds of services. And so that becomes a problem. And so they just simply have to educate their older population to say, no, you need to call 911. And so the ambulance will come in, and they've got the training, and they can assist them.
Right. So basically, you're trying to create an atmosphere where you're going to provide them with information and resources that they can then go and get on their own, because you can't really pick somebody up, as you know.
Well, and the problem is that the staff wants to. They want to help.
Of course.
And so they're torn, and then you got the lawyers saying, no, you can't do that.
Exactly.
And it just creates a problem there. But from a liability perspective, and that's the unfortunate thing, is that everything seems to be driven by legal liability and lawsuits, and what can they do and what can they not do. And so the natural tendency to want to help is that then they do, and then suddenly they're in the middle of a huge lawsuit. And so when associations get burned like that, they pull back. And then they have to educate their population, call 911, just pick up the phone.
Yes, in fact, I was contacted to do a little training for CAI. Will you tell our audience what is CAI and what are they doing besides getting people like gerontologists like me to come in and talk? Tell us about CAI, because that kind of it's a professional organization,
yes,
correct?
In fact, CAI, because the growth of the common interest development has been so significant. For example, in California, there are approximately 50,000 homeowner associations in California, with about 9 million people of Californians living in them. And you take that nationwide, there's something like 57 million people living in a common interest development. Then a professional organization sprang up to cater to that. And that's called CAI, or the Community Associations Institute. And they are primarily looking at education. and educating homeowners, board members, managers, certifying managers of common interest developments so that they can assist in that. And they bring in speakers like yourself to talk about these kinds of issues and put on large luncheons to invite people to those, homeowners and managers and board members, so that they can attend and learn about how to manage their associations, how to deal with these kinds of issues.
Which are only going to become more and more because you have an aging population. So not only CAI getting education for the professionals that are working within the associations, but also for the members. I mean, if you're a member of an association, you want to know what your resources are and what your association can do for you.
Yes.
And so what are the trends that you're seeing right now in retirement communities? All kinds, not just high rises. I mean, there's mobile home, there's all sorts of communities.
Yes, well, these common interest developments come in all shapes and sizes, and whether it be mobile home or recreational facilities built around a lake, and or the high rises, the retirement communities, they're in virtually anything you can think of is turned into a common interest development or becomes one. But one of the issues that they have to, in talking about the educational element, is a lot of people will move into a common interest development for the first time. And they may either be coming from apartment living or from owning a home. And they have a misconception that the association takes care of everything, that they buy their unit and they then can pick up the phone and call the association, come in and fix my leaky toilet or the leaky faucet or the cupboard that's not closing properly. Well, that's not what associations do. Associations are dealing with the common areas. And so there's a need to educate homeowners as to what are their proper roles. And then also to discover that there's a whole body of law that controls these that they need to be aware of. Board members especially, but homeowners as well, because that embodies their rights and their duties. And there are a lot of protections built into the law for owners who live in common interest developments.
So I know that some of the high rises, those are very exclusive. I mean, we have most of the nation's wealth is held in our 55 plus population, right?
Yes.
So what's going to happen, the trends, if people are aging in place, staying at home, but they're the only ones that can afford those exclusive high rises. How are you going to change the target audience that the association is marketing to? How's that going to work in the future? Because they're the ones that have all the money.
Yes. Well, to give you an idea, because you're talking about exclusive high rises, we represent a lot of the high rises in Los Angeles. And for example, one of them, the Penthouse, their dues that they pay monthly is over $6,000 per month. That's just their homeowner dues. So in addition to their mortgage. So that's what they're paying per month. And so you're talking about what happens when the baby boomers are no longer here and the younger generation stepping in. Well, that obviously is going to impact the market. Yeah. And the market will have to adjust to meet that. And that may be that property values will go down, or maybe there will be enough people coming into the market who have those high-paying jobs that they can afford to purchase those kinds of things. So it's just going to be something that will be fluid over the years, and that I'm sure is going to change. And it'll be interesting to watch this movement. The
organic,
yes,
transition. No matter where you live, quality longevity is what we all strive to achieve. When living in a common interest development, you need to educate yourself on your rights and the law. Be willing to take action if and when necessary. Stay tuned to Let's Talk to get the tools you need to be proactive.
I thought I had everything under control. Then, one day, something happened. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know there was help. Until someone told me.
Providing access to justice, the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles can help with domestic violence issues, eviction defense, government benefits, immigration, and other civil legal issues.
Hey Mom, yes I'm home, saved you some dinner.
Plan now for a major earthquake. Contact the Santa Monica Office of Emergency Management. Don't be caught in the dark.
Did you know that age discrimination is legal in retirement communities? Check your governing documents for the details. Our guest today, Adrian Adams, is explaining the importance of understanding exactly what you're getting into before you commit to becoming a member of any homeowners association. Okay, Adrian, so how is it legal? How is discrimination legal in retirement communities? Talk to us about retirement communities. Why are they great, and what do they do so differently, and do you have to show proof? I mean,
well, it took an act of Congress, literally, for that to carve out an exception on the age discrimination issues. And what they did was they looked at, you've got this aging population, and they would prefer to live with each other, and because they have similar interests. So they had to pass an act in 1995 called the Housing for Older Persons Act. And what it did was it carved out this exception to the age discrimination rule and said that if you have a community, basically there's three things that are required. One is they have to maintain at least 80% of all of the units must have somebody living in there who's at least 55 or older. They have to then have policies and procedures that it tells the whole world that they're a senior community, and they need to enforce those. And then third, they need to actually verify people's age. And so that becomes an issue sometimes. Privacy issues, I don't want to tell people how old I am. But the Housing and Urban Development, the department in Washington, D.C. that oversees all of this, has set criteria that says, okay, you can either, driver's license, passport, a number of different kinds of things that can be used to verify age. And if they meet all of that criteria, then they can exclude younger people from their facilities, from the development. And so those have become very popular. And you'll see in California, you look at Palm Springs, Palm Desert, La Quinta, there's just a huge number of these developments that cater to this aging population.
What do they do? So what's different than any other community association?
Well, they'll have specific things set up to meet the needs of their 55 plus community. In fact, if anybody's ever been to a leisure village, a leisure world, those are astonishing in what they have set up. And the number of programs, ceramics programs, exercise programs, groups getting together, similar interests, communications, they have transportation stuff set up in there, and they'll take them out on different shopping trips. I mean, there's just all kinds of activities that are set up designed to meet the needs and interests of the 55 plus community.
No, it's a great idea. I mean, if that's what you want, that's perfect.
Yes.
So now we're going to get into the nitty gritty about being proactive and getting the tools. So since I met you and started working with CAI, and I'm a member and own in an association, I think of the Davis-Stirling Act as my Bible as far as that goes. Now, tell us exactly what the Davis-Stirling Act is, and why should anyone that owns an association make this a very important document to refer to?
Okay. The Davis-Stirling Act is unique to California. And that's why you don't see the Davis-Stirling Act by that name in any other state. They all have their own separate acts dealing with these common interest developments that have become so popular. And it was a congressman or assemblyman, Larry Sterling, who authored the act and carried it through. And in 1985, it was passed by Sacramento, by the legislature, went into law in January of 1986. And what it does is it deals with how to operate these common interest developments, rights and responsibilities. And it has become probably the most active area of the law in California, with amendments to it, new laws being added to it every year since 1986. And in fact, it became so large that they actually went through and did a massive revision of the Davis-Stirling Act, and to simplify it, if it can be done. And it goes into effect, in fact, January 1 of next year, 2014. And what's important about it is that it spells out the rights of people who live in these communities. And their right to see records of the association, their right to attend board meetings, their right to stand up in a board meeting and have an open forum where they can address the board of directors and say that, I have something that the association needs to take care of. There are things that I've noticed on the property that are not safe, and you guys need to take care of it. So it deals with a lot of these kinds of things. In fact, communication between directors, that they cannot have email communications between meetings. They need to hold their meetings not in email, they need to hold their meetings in front of the membership. So just like a city council meeting, that the members can observe the board conducting its business, and so that they can see what's going on in their association. So all of that and much more is wrapped up in the Davis-Stirling Act, and members need to know about that act.
And you actually gave them access to the act by creating your award-winning website, and you also send out a newsletter, which I read cover to cover. I mean, if you can say that in an electronic newsletter. But so tell us how you created that, and how did you come up with that idea?
Well, there is such a need for people to know what their rights are. And then for boards of directors, once members get elected to the board, what are their duties as directors? That there was no really easy access to that information. And so I put all of that online, created a website called Davis-Stirling.com after the Davis-Stirling Act,
Right.
indexed all of those laws, and then started writing commentary on all of it so it was in clear, plain English so that people could read and understand what it was that they needed to do. And it has grown in such popularity that it's the #1 website in the state of California. It's in our industry. And it has a huge number of people using it throughout the industry, both homeowners, managers, board members, other law firms, insurance industry people, because it lays out very clearly what it is that the law says about all of these things. And they can look it up very easily. They can click on it, and it has an internal Google engine just on the website. They can actually Google things on the website and find what they need pertaining to their situation. And as you mentioned, I also do a weekly newsletter so that people, commenting on changes in the law, what's coming up, and answering people's questions. And so they'll send in a question, and I'll respond to those questions in the newsletter. And that's also become very popular and has grown to become the largest circulating newsletter in our state.
Wow. So basically, the Davis-Stirling Act, you know how some people think the HOA rules and regs and their CC&Rs, that they are the last word. But the act is the last word. So if they have a contrary rule, who's right?
Yes. Well, they have to defer to the law.
Okay.
So the law controls.
Right.
And in fact, as of January 1,
Right.
they even lay out in there as to the hierarchy of what controls, because it wasn't laid out before. And people, in fact, in some law firms were arguing as to what controlled. CC&Rs, the statute, the bylaws, all these different documents that control associations. So now that's all spelled out very clearly as to which you turn to when you have a conflict between documents.
And so basically so tell us the hierarchy.
Well, start out with the law, Davis-Stirling Act. Then you've got the CC&Rs, or the declaration, and that's the recorded document that creates the association. And by association is all the members. And so the members who buy into the development become that association. They then elect directors, and typically the association is incorporated, so you have articles of incorporation, and then you have bylaws, and the bylaws control things like how often the board meets and how often you have a meeting of the members and how do you elect a board of directors and what are the qualifications for being on the board. So each of these separate documents all interplay with each other, and they all have their own specific things that boards and members need to be aware of. And that's what I write about, because it can be very confusing.
Yeah.
And so we break it down into easy bite-sized pieces for members.
Yeah, easy for you maybe. You're an attorney, right? So let's kind of switch gears. So tell me, what are special assessments and why are they particularly ominous for especially older adults or those that are on a fixed budget? So give me an example of how that can affect somebody.
Yes. Well, it's particularly important for people who are buying into an association to evaluate the association, because if they get hit with a special assessment, the board has the power, the authority to, on its own, assess members. Regular dues increases annually 20%, but special assessments of 5% unless it's an emergency, and then there are no limits. And the membership themselves can approve special assessments. Where this comes up most often is if they've deferred maintenance. If maintenance hasn't been taken care of on the property and they've deferred for years. And then it can start resulting in special assessments. And they can be significant. The one association, in fact, I dealt with here in Santa Monica, $75,000 per person, per unit. So per unit special assessment. And that can force people out of their units. And with those on fixed income, there's no way that they can raise that kind of money. And so they need to pay attention to what's going on in their community, in their association. Make sure that their boards are staying on top of these kinds of things, because otherwise they can get hit with something that will force them right out of their unit.
Yep, so reserves is important.
Reserves,
Especially.
How much money are being set aside for
Right.
future large replacements, the roofs, plumbing
And the
repairs, those kinds of
lifelong
things.
The life of
Right,
those
they
things.
look at how much life is left in a roof, how much life is
Exactly.
left in a boiler, so that they're setting aside money to replace that, setting it in small amounts so that when they need over time, it's there.
Perfect.
Rather than sit down and write out a check for $75,000. Well, who can do
Who
that?
has that kind of money laying around? So I want to finish with one of your most interesting newsletters to me was all the things that somebody needs to know before they think about purchasing in an association. So you have about a little bit of time. So go over those top things that we need to consider if we're going to buy in an association.
Well, I think we started on that, and that is you want to know what kind of impact that financially that association is going to have on you. It may be a beautiful association. This is really where you want. You love the unit. Okay, well, the things that you have to look at, first of all, what's the financial condition of the association? And you want to look primarily at the reserves. How much money do they have in reserves? And the reserve studies will actually tell you by, again, going back to the Davis-Stirling Act, they're required to have a study, and the study is required to tell them what's the percent funding. So if they need this much money, the reserve will tell you, well, we're only 12% funded. I actually had an association that was only 12% funded. Okay, which meant then, if you look at that, that means there's a special assessment somewhere in the future. And you want to look at the size of the association. The larger the association, then the broader the base for which assessments can be spread, which means that it's a more stable association. The smaller the association, you look at a 5, 10, 15 unit association, if they need to special assess to replace their roofs, that is a much bigger bite that's going to come back down onto the owner of the unit. So you want to look at the maintenance. If you walk into an association and it's shabby, it's poorly maintained, you know it's going to be at some point a special assessment to pay for making the repairs. So there's, in fact, a whole list of things. There's 10 or 12 things that they need to be looking at, and I've laid those out on the website, and they can look at all of those.
Perfect. Well, we're going to send them to that website. So it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rochelle.
So our program is brought to you by the Commission for the Senior Community, focusing on preserving and improving the quality of life for Santa Monicans 60 and older. For more info, visit our website on the screen now. Thanks so much for watching Let's Talk. Till next time, be well, live well, age well.